Welcome back, and enjoy the story. The fluorescent lights of Jefferson High School's math classroom flickered with the rhythm of a dying heartbeat, casting intermittent shadows across the chalkboard where equations hung like unfinished questions. Mrs. Hope adjusted her collar, her fingers brushing against the crescent moon pendant that rested just above her heart, a piece of jewelry she'd worn every day for 12 years, yet couldn't remember ever putting on for the first time. Samuel Thompson, 12 years old with eyes too tired for his age, nudged his older brother Michael as they passed room 204. "Bro," he whispered, his voice carrying the weight of a discovery that would shatter their carefully constructed world. "The teacher's pendant. It's the same as the one in Mom's photo." Michael's textbooks nearly slipped from his arms as he turned to look. The pendant, a delicate crescent moon with an emerald shaped like a teardrop, caught the afternoon light, streaming through the classroom window. It was identical, impossibly identical to the one their mother Elise had worn in every photograph before her mysterious disappearance 12 years ago. The car accident had taken everything. The wreckage scattered across a lonely stretch of forest road, her purse found yards away, wedding ring still on her finger when they'd pulled her from the driver's seat. But her body, her presence, that had vanished completely, leaving behind only whispers, theories, and that haunting pendant burned into their memories. Charles Whitmore stared at the photograph his sons thrust before him that evening. The quarterly reports that usually commanded his absolute attention lay forgotten on his mahogany desk as he studied the face of his wife, young and radiant, holding baby Samuel while Michael, barely 2, tugged at her skirt. Around her neck, the pendant gleamed with the same mysterious beauty that now adorned his children's teacher. "Room 204, Michael repeated, watching his father's hands tremble, the first sign of vulnerability Charles had shown since the funeral. "Her name is Mrs. Hope Williams. Dad, it has to mean something." The night stretched endlessly as Charles paced his study, the city lights of Chicago twinkling below his penthouse office. The pendant had been a family heirloom, passed down through Elise's maternal line for generations. 3 emeralds shaped like teardrops, set in silver that had tarnished and been polished countless times. He'd had it appraised after the accident, one of a kind, irreplaceable. Hope Williams arrived early to school that Wednesday morning, as she always did. Teaching was more than a profession. It was a sanctuary where she could focus on equations that always had solutions, unlike the fragments of her own past that refused to form a complete picture. Since waking in a hospital 12 years ago with no memory of her life before, she'd built a new identity around helping children find their way through mathematical complexities. The knock on her classroom door interrupted her preparation of the day's lesson. She looked up to find a tall man in an expensive suit, his presence somehow familiar, yet entirely foreign. Charles Whitmore's reputation preceded him, Chicago's, most successful real estate mogul, philanthropist, and father to 2 of her most gifted but troubled students. "Mrs. Williams," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "I need to speak with you about this." His hand trembled slightly as he pulled out a photograph, placing it on her desk with the reverence reserved for sacred objects. Hope's world tilted on its axis. The photograph showed a woman who could have been her twin, surrounded by children she recognized from dreams that had haunted her sleep for over a decade. But it was the pendant that made her gasp. Her pendant, the only connection to a past that existed in shadows and half-formed memories. The truth tumbled out in fragments, like pieces of a shattered mirror slowly reassembling. Charles spoke of Elise, of their marriage, of children she'd loved with a fierce devotion that transcended memory. Hope touched her pendant, feeling its familiar weight against her chest, and suddenly she wasn't in a classroom anymore but in a nursery, humming lullabies to a baby with dark hair and knowing eyes. The memories came in waves, baking cookies, with Michael reading him stories, the joy of discovering she was pregnant again. But then came the darker recollections, arguments with Charles about his long hours, the loneliness of raising children while he built his empire, and finally, that terrible night when she'd received a call that had changed everything. Hope Williams was Elise Whitmore. Vanessa Blackwood heard the news before noon. As Charles's current fiancée and the largest private donor to Jefferson High School, she maintained an extensive network of information. She'd spent 12 years carefully constructing a life on the foundation of Elise's absence, positioning herself as the grieving widower's salvation and the children's devoted stepmother-to-be. The crystal wineglass shattered in her hands as she processed the implications. Every carefully laid plan, every manipulated moment that had brought her closer to controlling the Whitmore fortune, all of it threatened by a woman who should have stayed buried in the past. How could anyone know what really happened that night 12 years ago? Have you ever experienced or known someone who has experienced something that completely changed their understanding of their own identity? Comment below and share your thoughts. The reunion was anything but simple. Hope stood in the Whitmore mansion's grand foyer, a place that felt both foreign and intimately familiar. The marble floors, the sweeping staircase, the oil painting she'd chosen for the landing, pieces of a puzzle she'd forgotten she'd helped create. Michael and Samuel approached her with the careful steps of children who'd learned to protect their hearts from disappointment. Hope knelt before them, studying faces that belonged in her dreams, searching for words that could bridge 12 years of separation and confusion. "I know you don't remember me," Michael said, his voice breaking, slightly on the words, "but you used to call me Mikey, and you'd make these incredible chocolate chip cookies that Sam always tried to steal before they cooled." The memory hit her like lightning. She could smell the vanilla extract, feel the sticky dough on her fingers, hear their laughter echoing through a kitchen she'd decorated with sunflower curtains, with extra chocolate chips around the edges, she whispered, "because you said that was where all the magic lived." Samuel, still partially hidden behind his older brother, stepped forward. "You left when I was just a baby," he said, his words heavy with years of unanswered questions. "Why didn't you come back?" The question shattered something inside Hope. She pulled both boys into her arms, tears flowing freely as 12 years of suppressed maternal instinct overwhelmed her. "I couldn't remember," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry, I couldn't remember anything." From the doorway, Charles watched his family slowly reassemble itself. But happiness was a luxury they couldn't afford yet. Vanessa's influence ran deep throughout Chicago's social circles, and her reaction to Elise's return had been swift and vicious. Lawyers were already being contacted, investigating any irregularities in their upcoming marriage contract. Threats, veiled as concern for the children's welfare, reached Charles through intermediaries. That evening, in the privacy of his study, Charles had a conversation that would haunt him. A private investigator he'd kept on retainer for years had finally found something. Security footage from a small-town hospital, dated 12 years ago, showing a woman matching Vanessa's description, leaving the trauma ward just hours after. An unidentified accident victim had been brought in. "She knew," the investigator said quietly. "She knew Elise was alive, and she made sure no one would ever connect the dots." The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place with terrifying clarity. The confrontation happened in the school parking lot under the harsh glow of sodium streetlights. Vanessa arrived with lawyers and security, demanding Hope's immediate termination and threatening legal action if Charles continued to harass her with these ridiculous accusations. But Charles had brought his own evidence, financial records showing payments to unnamed sources in small towns across Illinois, hospital records that had been sealed with bribery, a trail of corruption that led directly to Vanessa's doorstep. "You left her in that hospital," Charles said, his voice deadly calm. "You knew she was alive, suffering from amnesia, and you let me grieve her for 12 years while you positioned yourself to take her place." Vanessa's mask finally slipped, revealing the calculating predator beneath. "She was weak," she hissed. "She would have held you back, held the company back. I made you stronger." Hope stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You stole 12 years from my children. 12 years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, first days of school. You turned my family into strangers." The legal ramifications were swift and merciless. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder, the charges mounted as more evidence surfaced. Vanessa's network of secrets unraveled, taking down corrupt officials and exposing a web of deceit that had infected multiple levels of Chicago's power structure. But beyond the courtrooms and newspaper, headlines, a family was healing. Hope chose to keep teaching, finding in her students a reminder of resilience and hope. She worked part-time, spending afternoons reconnecting with Michael and Samuel, learning their rhythms and rediscovering the mother she'd been forced to forget. Therapy sessions helped them all navigate the complex emotions of reunion. Michael struggled with anger at the lost years, while Samuel grappled with feeling like he was betraying the memory of the mother he'd constructed in his mind. Charles carried guilt for not looking harder, for allowing Vanessa into their lives. But gradually new memories began to form. Family dinners filled with tentative conversation and shared laughter, movie nights where they discovered their individual quirks and preferences. Moments of recognition when Hope's muscle memory would guide her to arrange Michael's books in a specific order or know exactly how Samuel liked his sandwich cut. She also learned about the daughter she'd unknowingly raised during her amnesiac years, Lily, now 12, who had been placed with relatives when the truth emerged. The reunion with Lily brought its own challenges, as the girl struggled to understand how her entire life had been based on a lost identity. But love, Hope discovered, had many forms, and the bonds formed through hardship were often the strongest. Spring arrived with a warmth that seemed to promise new beginnings. Hope organized a family picnic in Lincoln Park, the same place where she and Charles had been married 18 years ago. As they spread the blanket under the oak tree, where they'd carved their initials, Hope felt the final pieces of herself clicking into place. Michael brought his latest school pictures, eager to share his academic achievements with the mother who'd missed so many milestones. Samuel, shy but determined, presented her with a handmade card welcoming her home. Charles watched from nearby, his eyes bright with unshed tears, as he witnessed his family's careful reconstruction. "I want to give you something," Hope said, pulling out a small velvet box. Inside were 3 smaller pendants, each a piece of her original crescent moon, carefully divided by a jeweler. One for each child, one for Charles, and one for herself. "So we never forget," she said as she placed the chains around their necks, "that even when we're apart, we're still connected by something stronger than memory." Charles took her hands, his voice thick with emotion. "Can you forgive us? For not finding you sooner?" Hope smiled, the expression transforming her face into something radiant. "There's nothing to forgive. Sometimes we have to lose ourselves completely to truly understand what matters most." As the sun set over Chicago's skyline, painting the city in gold and amber, the Whitmore family sat together in comfortable silence. They'd lost 12 years, but they'd gained something more valuable: the knowledge that love could survive the deepest wounds, that family was more than shared memories, and that hope, no matter how hidden, could always find its way back home. Congratulations, type 7 in the comments, so I know you stayed with me until the end. Leave a like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. See you.